The biting wind of New Mexico in December does not just chill the skin. It hunts for the bone, seeking any gap in a threadbare coat to sink its frozen teeth into. Imagine, for a moment, being cast out into a horizontal white void where the horizon has vanished, carrying nothing but a rusted rifle and the fading warmth of a 6-year-old boy's hand in yours. This is how Valentina Cruz's journey began, a walk towards certain death that ended in a discovery so profound it didn't just save her life, but dismantled a corrupt empire. Stay with me until the end of this story, because what this widow dug up from the steaming depths of a hidden cavern is a masterclass in how the world's most invisible people can become its most formidable forces. If you find value in stories of resilience and justice, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It helps us keep these forgotten chronicles alive. The snow in Cobre Rojo didn't fall, it attacked. Valentina Cruz, 31 years old, felt the ice caking on her eyelashes, turning her vision into a blurred mosaic of gray and white. Beside her, little Mateo was stumbling, his breath coming in short, ragged puffs of silver mist. They had been walking for 3 hours since the sheriff, a man named Drury with eyes like dull marbles, had stood on their porch and tossed their single suitcase into the slush. He didn't care that it was 10 degrees below zero. He didn't care that Valentina's husband, Esteban, had only been dead for a month. To the people of Cobre Rojo, Valentina was just the Indian widow, a woman of Apache and Mexican blood who had no business owning a plot of land that a powerful man wanted. Esteban had been a strong man, a miner who knew the language of the rocks, but he had made the mistake of seeing something he shouldn't have in the deep tunnels of the Hargrove Mining Company. He had seen ledgers that didn't match the ore being shipped out. He had spoken up, and a week later, he was in a damp, freezing cell in Mineral Wells, accused of stealing company tools. He died there, officially of pneumonia, but Valentina knew better. She knew the cold of that cell was a weapon used by Preston Hargrove to silence a whistleblower. And now, Hargrove wanted the small ranch Esteban had left her. By forging a debt that didn't exist and using a sheriff he kept in his pocket, Hargrove had finally stripped her of everything. As the blizzard intensified, Valentina felt a terrifying numbness creeping up her legs. It was the sleep of the frozen, the gentle invitation of the snow to simply lie down and let the white blanket cover them. Mateo's grip was weakening. She pulled him closer, wrapping her father's old wool poncho around both of them, but it was like trying to stop a flood with a silk ribbon. She looked up at the jagged silhouette of the volcanic hills, praying to the spirits of her ancestors and the god of the mission. She didn't want wealth. She didn't even want revenge at that moment. She just wanted her son to see the sun again. Then she smelled it. It wasn't the crisp, metallic scent of snow. It was sulfur. It was wet earth. It was life. Through the swirling white curtain, she saw a thin, ghostly finger of vapor rising from a crevice in the black volcanic rock. She clawed her way toward it, dragging Mateo, her boots slipping on hidden ice. They rounded a massive basalt pillar and found a narrow opening, a literal wound in the side of the mountain. As they stepped inside, the screaming wind was suddenly muffled. The air didn't just stop biting, it began to caress. They descended a natural stone ramp, and the darkness gave way to a soft, ethereal blue glow. There, in the heart of the mountain, was a subterranean cathedral, a natural hot spring, fed by the volcanic veins of the earth, bubbled into a deep pool of mineral-rich water. The steam rose in thick, lazy curtains, coating the walls in shimmering moisture. Valentina stripped the frozen rags from Mateo's shivering body and eased him into the shallows. The boy let out a sob. not of pain, but of the overwhelming shock of warmth. As she sat beside him, soaking her own frostbitten feet, Valentina felt a change in her spirit. The mountain had offered them a sanctuary that the town had denied them. But as the mist cleared, she realized they were not the first to find this place. In the shadows of the far wall, she saw the remnants of a human life. There was a stack of moth-eaten blankets, a rusted tin coffee pot, and a heavy wooden tool chest secured with a thick, oxidized padlock. Valentina approached the chest. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't just a cave, it was a hideout. She took her husband's rifle, using the heavy steel buttstock to smash the rusted lock. It took 3 agonizing strikes that echoed like gunshots through the cavern, but finally, the wood splintered and the lid creaked open. Inside, she didn't find gold. She found something far more dangerous to Preston Hargrove. There were surveying tools, a compass, and a leather-bound journal. On the inside cover, a name was written in faded ink: Aurelio Medina. Valentina gasped. Aurelio had been a legendary prospector in Cobre Rojo who had vanished 10 years ago. The town gossip said he had run off to Mexico with stolen money. But as Valentina began to read the journal by the flickering light of a small fire she started with dry moss, the truth emerged from the grave. Aurelio's handwriting was frantic, the script of a man who knew his days were numbered. He detailed how he had discovered a massive mother lode of silver-bearing galena that ran directly under the lands Hargrove was currently mining, and more importantly, under the small ranches of the local families. He wrote about how Hargrove had tried to buy him off, and when that failed, how the sheriff had begun a campaign of terror. Aurelio had fled to this cave to hide his evidence, planning to reach the federal authorities in Santa Fe. He never made it. The last entry read, "If someone finds this, know that the maps in the tin box under the loose stone by the spring are the true surveys. Hargrove is building his empire on the blood of those he buries in the dark." Valentina's hands trembled. She wasn't just a victim of a cruel winter anymore. She was the keeper of a dead man's voice. She went to the spring, searching the moist earth until she felt a flat, unnatural stone. She pried it up with her knife, revealing a sealed tin box. Inside were the original land grants and the survey maps, showing that Hargrove had been mining outside his legal boundaries for a decade. He was stealing millions from the government and from the very people he had evicted. Valentina looked at the documents, then at her sleeping son. The fear that had lived in her chest for months evaporated, replaced by a cold, surgical resolve. She realized that her invisibility as a poor widow was now her greatest weapon. Hargrove thought she was dying in the snow. He wouldn't be looking for a ghost. For 3 days, Valentina and Mateo lived in the warmth of the cave. She used the rifle to hunt a mountain hare that had sought shelter near the entrance, roasting the meat over the thermal heat. She felt her strength returning, not just physically, but ancestrally. She thought of her Apache grandmother, who had taught her that the earth provides for those who listen. She realized that Esteban hadn't died for nothing. He had paved the way for her to finish what he started. But on the 4th morning, a flash of light caught her eye at the cave's mouth. She crept to the entrance and saw it. The glint of a telescope from the ridge across the canyon. Hargrove's men. They weren't just waiting for her to die. They were patrolling, making sure no one stumbled upon the secret of the thermal vents. She knew she couldn't stay. She wrapped the documents in oilcloth, strapped the rifle to her back, and prepared for a 12-mile trek through the high passes to the mission of San Isidro. It was a journey that would kill most men, but Valentina was no longer a woman who could be killed by the cold. The hike was a blur of physical agony. Every step in the deep snow felt like pulling her legs out of wet cement. but she held the image of the hot cave in her mind. The blue water, the evidence of the crime, the memory of Esteban's smile. She reached the mission at sunset, her clothes frozen stiff like a suit of armor. When Padre Tomas opened the heavy oak doors, he didn't see the broken widow he expected. He saw a specter of justice. Inside the warmth of the rectory, the padre examined the documents. His face went pale. "Valentina," he whispered, "this is enough to hang Preston Hargrove. But you have walked into a hornet's nest. Drury and Hargrove have ears everywhere." Even as he spoke, the sound of galloping horses thudded against the frozen ground outside. The heavy doors of the church burst open. Preston Hargrove stepped in, his expensive fur-lined coat dusted with snow. Behind him stood Sheriff Drury, his hand resting on the grip of his revolver. Hargrove's voice was like gravel grinding together. "Padre, I believe you're harboring a trespasser, a woman who stole company property before she fled into the hills." Valentina didn't hide. She stepped out from the shadows of the sacristia, the Winchester rifle leveled at Hargrove's heart. Her voice was steady, devoid of the tremors of the woman who had been evicted 4 days prior. "I didn't steal from you, Preston," she said. "I found what you stole from everyone else. I found Aurelio Medina's journal. I found the silver maps, and I found the reason why my husband really died in that cell." Drury sneered, stepping forward. "You're a crazy squaw with a rusty gun. Give it here before I lose my patience." "That's far enough, Sheriff." The voice came from the back of the darkened pews. A man rose, wearing a dusty duster and a wide-brimmed hat. He hadn't been noticed in the gloom. He stepped into the light, revealing a silver star pinned to his vest. "Marshal Elias Correa," he said, his voice ringing with federal authority. "I've been in this territory for 6 months investigating the disappearance of Aurelio Medina and the irregularities in the Hargrove audits. I was just waiting for the final piece of the puzzle. It seems Mrs. Cruz just handed it to me on a silver platter." The tension in the room was a physical weight. Hargrove laughed, a cold, arrogant sound. "You think a few maps found in a cave by a hysterical woman will stand up in a federal court? I own the judges in this territory. I own the land. This is my kingdom." "Not anymore," the marshal replied. "Take them, boys." From the side entrances, 4 more deputies appeared, their rifles trained on the tycoon and his lapdog sheriff. The trial took place 3 months later in Santa Fe. It was a spectacle that drew journalists from as far as Denver and San Francisco. The courtroom was a sea of polished wood and legal jargon, a place designed to intimidate someone like Valentina. Hargrove's defense attorney was a man who cost more per hour than a miner made in a year. He was an elegant predator in a silk cravat who tried to dismantle Valentina's character with the precision of a surgeon. "Mrs. Cruz," the lawyer began, leaning over the witness stand with a condescending smile. "You claim you found these documents in a mystical hot cave during a blizzard? A cave that no surveyor has ever recorded? Is it not more likely that you, in your grief and desperation, forged these papers to seek revenge for your husband's unfortunate illness?" Valentina sat tall. She didn't look at the lawyer. She looked at the jury, a group of men who knew the hardness of the New Mexico soil. "The cave is real," she said, her voice echoing through the silent chamber. "The warmth in that mountain is the only reason I am alive to speak to you. You call me desperate. I was. But desperation doesn't make a woman learn how to forge legal land grants from 1880. It makes a woman survive so she can bring the truth to light. My husband didn't die of an illness. He died of a system that thinks people like us are as disposable as the tailings of a mine." The lawyer scoffed. "A moving speech, But we have no proof that these ledgers are anything but the ramblings of a long-dead hermit. Without corporate verification, this is all hearsay. At that moment, the back doors of the courtroom swung open. A young man in a dark suit walked down the center aisle. The color drained from Preston Hargrove's face. It was Charles Hargrove, Preston's own nephew and the company's chief accountant. He didn't look at his uncle. He walked straight to the marshal and handed him a heavy, black-bound ledger. "My uncle taught me that family is everything," Charles said to the judge. "But he also taught me that every debt must be paid. These are the secret books, the ones kept in the floorboards of the main office. They match every word in Aurelio Medina's journal, every acre stolen, every life silenced." The courtroom erupted. Preston Hargrove was led away in irons, sentenced to 17 years in a federal penitentiary. Sheriff Drury was stripped of his badge and sent to the same prison where Esteban had breathed his last. When spring finally arrived in Cobre Rojo, it was different. The snow melted, revealing a land that no longer belonged to a tyrant. The federal government, moved by the sheer scale of the fraud, returned the mineral rights to the rightful heirs and the local community. Valentina Cruz didn't just get her ranch back. She became the administrator of the richest silver vein in the territory. But she didn't build a mansion in the city. She stayed in Cobre Rojo. She hired the miners who had been exploited by Hargrove, paying them 3 times the standard wage and ensuring that no man ever worked in a tunnel that wasn't safe. She built a sturdy, beautiful house of stone and timber directly over the entrance to the thermal cave. The spring became her sanctuary, a place where she and Mateo could sit in the warmth and remember the cold that had forged them. The most important part of her legacy, however, wasn't the silver. Along with Padre Tomas and a young, idealistic lawyer from Santa Fe, Valentina founded the Esteban Cruz Justice Fund. It was a legal aid society dedicated to representing widows, indigenous families, and poor laborers who were being squeezed by the powerful. She knew that not everyone would find a hot cave in a blizzard, so she decided to be the warmth for those left out in the cold. As Valentina stood on her porch one evening, watching the sunset turn the New Mexico sky into a tapestry of violet and gold, she realized that the world had tried to erase her. It had tried to freeze her out and make her invisible. But in the darkness of that mountain, she had learned that being invisible is just another way of being a ghost. And ghosts are the only things that can haunt a guilty man until he falls. She took Mateo's hand, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look back at the shadows. She looked forward at the light she had fought so hard to claim. Justice, she realized, isn't something that is given by a court. It is something you dig out of the earth with your bare, frozen hands. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that the winter never lasts forever. Until next time, keep looking for the truth, even in the darkest caves.